welcome to Scilence, a podcast where women get really honest about surviving and thriving in what often feels like a man's world. My guests are Wonder Women from the fields of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM, where inclusivity and diversity can be a real problem. I know this only too well as a female Southeast Asian mechanical engineer. I'm kind of a minority within a minority. I'm Dr. Shini Somara, an engineer turned broadcaster. Throughout my career, I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation. And through my TV work, I've met some incredibly inspiring women from a diverse range of STEM fields. Talking to these exceptional ladies has often left me feeling empowered, hopeful, and excited about life. And I believe Scilence will enrich you too. Each week, every woman in STEM shares her unique experiences with absolutely no pressure in having to promote her accomplishments or guard her impressive reputation. Because I've come to realise that everyone is just way more open and relaxed when they're anonymous. So I deliberately disguise my guest voices so that we're just connecting as human beings rather than human doings. It's my hope that you really relate to what we chat about today. If so, please do subscribe to Scilence and maybe even rate and review the show. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guests are in the field of engineering. Hi!
Hello!
So good to have you here. Wow, I'm so excited. There's so many of you.
We're probably more excited.
Yeah? It's amazing that we meet because you're from far away and you're in my home city.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all so enthusiastic about engineering.
We try.
Where did it start, this enthusiasm?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think for me personally, I didn't really think of myself as an engineer type or someone that wanted to go into engineering, but I knew I liked to solve problems and apply theoretical skills to like a very real application. And when I was in high school, I realized that that's kind of what engineering is. So that's what I decided to study, but it wasn't like something that I knew my whole life I wanted to do. And I think that's something we'll probably discuss later, but I didn't see myself in this field or see people like me in doing things in this field. So it was unclear for me when I kind of stepped into the void of what engineering would be.
So, I mean, was there a time when you figured out what engineering is? Because sometimes you say the word engineering and people are like, they don't know what that means.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm personally still figuring it out. I'm in my last year of school. We all are, pretty much. So I think I'm still figuring it out. It's like, we've talked about this together. It's some of those moments when you're in those really hard classes and those really hard labs when you finally have that identity of like, I feel like an engineer right now. Mm-hmm. But that's not all the time for me. It comes in spurts and like sparks of these moments where I do feel like my identity is finally of an engineer. But I think I'm still figuring out what engineering is.
Right. How about you?
I guess maybe to go back to that background question, similar to my friend, my peer, I really struggled at first with deciding to become an engineer. Even I thought I should go into like marketing or something like that because that's what I saw in media. That's what powerful females did. Like they were in business or in marketing or something like that. I even in my senior year of high school took marketing class at the local city college to see if I liked it. I hated it. It was not at all for me at all. I thought it was so dumb, and I loved math and science and physics. My whole life I did math with my dad for fun. Like I really, if you looked at me objectively, would be like, that girl should be an engineer. And I was just so incredibly resistant to it. And it took,
Why?
I don't know, because and my dad would tell me that like he would never tell me what I should do, but he would be like, maybe you should think about engineering. Maybe you should think about engineering. And I was like, Dad, like I'm not one of those people. Like we didn't grow up like I'm a mechanical engineering major. I didn't grow up working on cars with my dad. And I had a very strong idea of what it meant to be an engineer, and I didn't think that was me because I also loved art and I loved talking to people and I loved being creative, and to me those were dissimilar. Those were mutually exclusive, being an engineer and having that interest. And it took a long time for me to realize how completely wrong that was, and that that I had some wrong opinions that there was a lot I had to kind of work through there.
It's kind of fascinating that the stereotype of the typical engineer is almost what put you off.
Exactly.
Doing something that you're naturally good at.
It is exactly that. It is exactly that. I just didn't have a single person that I could look to and think, oh, I look like that, or I could be that, or I could do that. Everyone in engineering fields that I was looking to and I was seeing felt so dissimilar from myself and how I viewed myself.
Yeah.
It took I remember I was in an engineering program even in high school, which I loved with my whole heart, and I was there after school every day, and I loved it, and I was turning down a hex axle on a lathe, so like bringing down the radius of it, and I was talking to my engineering director, and he was saying, Sienna, so like what do you think you might want to study? And I told him I was now kind of maybe considering mechanical engineering, but I wasn't one of those guys. And he said, Sienna, look at what you're doing right now. You're machining a part right now as you're telling me you're not one of those mechanical engineering guys. Like, stop, like, put away those like disillusions. Yeah. Like, absolutely you can do it if it's something that you want to do.
That's awesome.
I'm actually glad I'm going next because one of the reasons I went into engineering is because I was an artistic person. But I also arguably came in with the most misunderstanding of what this field offered for me, knowing what we know now. So I grew up in Florida. I don't think that gives too much away. We can call me the Floridian one. That's embarrassing. So I grew up in Florida. We're immigrants from Brazil. I also think that's a common story. I just give too much away. And I remember when they used to ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I used to say Bob the Builder, which I don't know if this is a show in the UK, but at least in the US, yes. It's that show where, you know, the Bob, he has all these these construction machine friends, and they build houses. And I remember I loved that show so much, and I loved building Legos, and I loved painting on my mom's face. She literally let me paint all over her face. So I've always been a creative person, and I've always liked building things, and I would fantasize about building things. Like, I still remember in like preschool, like before we even start formal education, having this recurring dream of building this miniature pirate ship, and I fixated on the fact that in one of the pirate ships there would be a little treasure chest, and instead of real treasure, because it was miniature, it would be like crushed shells, and that would represent the coins. I don't know, I'm going way back here, but basically I always have fantasies of creating things and building things, and at some point they were like, oh, you're good at math and you're artsy, so architecture. And I wanted to be like Zaha Hadid or Tata Wando, so I did a camp in high school over the summer, and I realized I'm a terrible architect. I just don't have a knack for it. It's like those two things combined does not make architecture. It's so, well, there's more to it, right?
Do you think that if you're good at math and creative, that you should go into architecture?
People think like careers are these weird little simple
equations.
Yeah, these little equations. Blue plus red makes purple, and it's like, no, there's so much that goes into that, and there's such a vision that goes into architecture, for example. So that was right after that. I was, all of a sudden, it was my last year of high school, and then I was like, oh, I'm creative and I'm good at school, engineering. And I was like, mechanical's really broad, and we make things. Truly, truly, truly. That is why I entered into mechanical engineering and why I stuck with it for so long. And then I realized, perchance, it was not for me in the way that it was taught currently at our school, at any school really. So it's been quite a journey in engineering for me, because I still believe in it, because I still believe at its core it is what I thought it was. It is just knowing how things work, and then creating new things with that knowledge. However, I definitely struggled a lot because the inherent talents that you're supposed to have when going into mechanical engineering, I never had. Like I told you yesterday, I'm like terrible at physics, but I want to be good at it. And it sometimes it excites me and it connects, but then that feeling is very ephemeral, and then it leaves, and then I'm back to being like, gravity goes up, right? So.
I think my story might not be as inspiring. Like, since I was a little kid, my parents told me I should do engineering. They're immigrants from Iran.
I'm with you.
Yeah, they're immigrants from Iran. They're like, we came to this country, you're going to do something that's practical, and that, like, we didn't sacrifice all the stuff to come here for you to study anything other than that. And then once you do engineering, then you can go pursue whatever else you want to do. Just have that degree in your pocket.
Totally relate.
And so as a kid, I was always very resistant to engineering. Even though it was always around me, I didn't realize, like, my dad was, like, that was his passion. Like, he would buy old computers and fix them up, or, like, buy different parts and put them together to build his ideal machines. And I would always be there for that, but I didn't like see that as engineering. I just thought of it as this thing that my parents wanted me to do, so I should just avoid it. And so I always thought I'd go into like law or like politics, and those are definitely things that I want to pursue in the future. But now I think what really changed was in high school, I like mentioned once to my parents that like the robotics team was gonna meet like freshman year. I don't know why I like mentioned this to them, and they were like, go. And so I went to like the first like robotics meeting my freshman year. They were like trying to put a team together. We had like a little bit of funding to go compete in First Robotics, which is, I don't know if you're aware of that, but it's a organization in the US that does robotics programs.
Will.i.am is here.
Oh yeah, Will.i.am.
Will.i.am's
Yeah.
The founder of First Robotics, I think, is at this.
He actually spoke at the summit 2 years ago, and it was one of like the best experiences of my life. But anyway, so I went to this like first robotics meeting, and then we like kind of got into the throes of like building our robot, and like at first I was like super intimidated because all the guys in the team, like I felt like they knew what they were doing, even though they were also high school freshmen. Like they really probably didn't know any more than I did. So I kind of just like pushed my way into them and started like, I don't know.
Good for you.
Yeah, started like soldering things. I don't know.
Good.
Yeah, and then
sometimes that intimidation can make you kind of hang back.
Yeah.
And be in the background.
I think that's always like pushed me. I've always been like, I can do the thing. And so them being like, you can't, made me want to do it. And then that somehow inadvertently made me be like, oh, I actually can do this thing and actually enjoy doing it. Oh, and this is engineering, I guess. So maybe my parents were right, but I can't let them know that. So then we went to our first robot.
So that was all you pursuing a genuine interest, not fueled by your parents?
At that point, yeah, but I didn't want to admit that to myself.
Oh, okay.
I think I've always liked building things. I've always also been very creative. My parents always put me into like art and music classes growing up. Not as like it was never pushed on me as something like, oh, this is gonna be your career, but it was always like, oh, like these are things that you should definitely do and you have the opportunity to do them.
Right, to be a well-rounded person.
Yeah, and there were opportunities that they didn't necessarily have any on to do growing up, like playing sports or like taking piano lessons. So they wanted me to have that. And so I'd always enjoyed being very hands-on in whatever I did, and then I realized like in an engineering related field, like you can build things and be very like I don't have to sit there reading all the time. I actually do something with my hands and like not be super fidgety. Yeah. And so then I went to my first competition, my freshman year, our first robotics competition, and it like felt like I was at like a varsity like sports game because like everyone's super into it. They have like their team mascots. And it's like all these like very like-minded people who like to do this like very specific thing. And it was like cool being in that setting because like I think a lot of times in schools a lot of kids are very disinterested in what they do because it is all like very pushed on us. But this felt like everyone was there because they wanted to be there.
Yeah. And
I think that was when I was like, oh, like something clicked. I was like, this is something that I want to keep feeling this feeling. And then
were you always naturally good at maths and physics?
Yeah, I was always very good at math. Not necessarily like sciences. I think maybe science education just wasn't like taught well in a lot of the schools I went to. I didn't really like word problems, for example, which I guess is like what problem solving is. and I think studying engineering like in the beginning, that was really hard for me to get over that hump. I think we've talked about this before as a group of like what engineering teaches you is how to be a good problem solver and like not being scared to like take on something that comes your way. And I think that's one of the biggest things I learned going into the field, because even when I was applying for colleges my senior year of high school, I still didn't really understand what engineering was. Like I was like, I want to build something, and I guess my parents want me to do this field too. Yeah. So hopefully those two things will go hand in hand. And then I think starting my engineering education, there has been things that I haven't been as happy with in my curriculum, like when things are a bit more theoretical, but when I've actually been able to like be in a lab and working and like seeing the applications of what I'm doing right there, like I think what I like about, I'm an electrical engineer, unlike my friends here, I think what I like about EE is like you can build something right then and there and like actuate it and see it work. Like you have an Arduino and you can like set up like a push button system to make, I don't know, we like made a vending machine in one class or whatever. So it's just cool getting to like see things happen in real time.
So it sounds like your like natural interest and genuine love of subject came through in the end.
Yeah, I think so. I think having your parents tell you to do something makes you a lot more resistant to it.
Yeah. Okay, last but not least.
Okay, I'm gonna finish up, I guess. So I got into engineering, I think, by accident. I was never really surrounded by it when I was young. My parents aren't in it. It wasn't a big, like, we didn't have computer science at my high school, didn't have we didn't have a robotics club, nothing. And I thought I was gonna go into medicine, when I was finishing up my high school education, and then decided kind of on a whim, I think, to pursue bioengineering instead of just biology because I wanted to stand out on my application for med school or kind of something silly like that. And then I came to college in engineering, and I think it was things that I don't know, there were majors and there were people that I had never been around before. And then I think what kept me in engineering was the people in engineering. And
Why,
then
what they like?
I think we're the five of us are particularly really lucky at our school and at our environment because we have a pretty, I don't know, the people who I'm surrounded with I always feel like are more than just engineers, and we'll probably talk about this again later, but we all have interests and we're not like pigeonholed into like this. We work in labs and we like math and science, et cetera, like kind of the stereotype is. So I don't know, it made studying more fun, and I liked the group work that we got to do, whereas a lot of my friends in humanities majors, you know, work more on their own, and I liked to be around people all times of the day, and I liked solving problems with people and getting to, you know, see how kind of all our skills combined. So I didn't get into engineering because I wanted to be an engineer, and I don't even think like a lot of us knew what engineering was at all. I had no idea, and I still think that what engineering really isn't 100% clear when you're a student, because as much as we get to build things and do really hands-on work, I feel like at school we're like getting the foundations, et cetera, and we kind of, or at least in the beginning I saw engineering as, or aerospace engineers, like they build an airplane, but really they're building a part of an airplane that's going to fit into this bigger system, and you need an engineer to build each part, then you need someone to combine it all together, then you need people to sell it and do this and do that, and it's so much different than when we kind of look at things as a big whole. Now when you're an engineer, you're looking at a smaller part of that big whole. So I think it took me a really long time to realize that, and I think I struggled with it because I wanted to do the whole once I got into mechanical out of bioengineering.
Especially if you're coming from an angle of, you know, I might do medicine, where you would be the whole solution
to a problem.
Yeah.
And now you're just one in probably a team of anywhere from 20 to 100 or so people, depending on what you're doing. And I think in mechanical and electrical, which are both kind of more hardware focused fields, that's what people want to do. Or at least coming into college, what they want to do. They want to build the whole system, and we have, you know, like a capstone project where we're building a whole thing, where everything that is going to get completed is done by each of us, and we get to participate in every single part of it. And that's not the same when you leave school. And I think for me, that's been kind of a big realization that I've had to make, that I'll be just doing a little part. And sure, you get to see that impact, but maybe not as much as we're told, or we're kind of fantasize about. That whole big illusion, like what you were talking about before. It's the same thing. But yeah, I got into engineering by accident, and I will never regret it, even if my career takes me somewhere else, which it probably will.
What's happening with the biomedical?
It's not really something on my radar anymore.
Who knows?
I think
maybe one day.
Maybe, yeah, for sure. It's totally possible right now. I think maybe outside of the U.S. as well, but I think in the U.S. when you're really good at science, they tell you, or you like it, they tell you, oh, be a doctor. You'll make money. You'll, you know, get a good education. Like, that's what makes sense for you. And I think I was told that a lot of my, like, youth, that, like, oh, you like science. Well, you should be a doctor. And so I kind of just thought that's what I wanted, even though that's just kind of where people push you in a way when you're good at something. I guess we talked about this kind of before too. But so I had this big illusion that that's what I wanted to do, and then quickly realized that's not really me, and that's not really what I want anymore. And med devices is obviously, or any sort of engineering related to the healthcare field, is really different than being a doctor. So maybe it will push me back there. But right now, it's not so much on my radar anymore.
And I think that's the beauty of careers and studying, and even just the field of engineering. It's so malleable and adaptable and agile. And, you know, one thing's for sure, amongst this group, there is a genuine interest in what you're doing. Like, it sounds like you guys are following your heart, and that's really what
we're trying.
Engineering needs.
Yeah.
You're all saying things that are like supporting each other anyway, so it's kind of like one voice.
Yeah,
I
like
like
that.
the voices.
Yeah. I think we share a lot of the same values.
Yeah.
When it comes to like what we want to pursue.
And we do spend a lot of time
And we do spend a lot
together.
of time
So
Yeah.
we're
I mean,
similar-ish.
you mentioned actually like how lucky you are to have found this group of people. I honestly couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it is amazing to see you guys work together because you're so compatible. How did that come about? Like, was it pure chance or?
So 2 of us were roommates freshman year, and we've been engineers since the beginning, and we saw this opportunity 2 years ago. We got an email saying there's going to be this Grand Challenges Summit in Washington, D.C. The school will fund you guys to go. And we were like, free trip to DC, of course. And so she and
motivation.
Yeah. No, and it seemed free trip to DC. So we decided to go, and it was a really cool conference. We got to see really awesome people speak, like the guy who founded First Robotics for me. That was really cool.
There's like the chief medical officer of the UK, and at that time I was also biomedical engineering. So it was just these people who make huge decisions for the world. Like these people, and I think that's something I've always wanted to do, is like have that sort of influence. And you see these people like that are so passionate about these big grand challenges in engineering, and they're actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
Which was really cool.
And it was cool because they're tying in like interdisciplinary concepts into this engineering conference. They talked a lot about policy back then, about how important it is for engineers to like branch out and be in all spheres of public society, which is something that we all talk about a lot too. And I was really like amazed by that, because I think being an engineering school, a lot of times you feel very siloed. Maybe not necessarily our engineering program, but just in general in the field.
That's such an interesting point, because a lot of people think that medicine is really like saving the world, and going into those kinds of fields means that you're making a massive change to humanity, and no one realizes the impact that engineers have.
Yeah. I think we talk about being a doctor as almost like a one-on-one situation, and you feel the impact that you have on someone's life so like clearly. But engineering, it's like you can make an impact on millions, billions,
but you don't necessarily interact with them or engage with them all the time.
But it just kind of depends on what makes you happy, what makes you like thrive. Is it that one-on-one connection, or is it maybe like possibly having that impact on a lot of people and maybe just not seeing it so clearly?
What kind of examples blew you away with like, oh my gosh, engineering can have such a massive impact?
Good question.
Going back to the first.
And by the way, feel free to all jump in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, specifically at the conference or in general?
Just in general.
In
like,
general.
If someone's going, but I still don't know what engineering is. Like, what would be those examples where you're like, whoa?
Because I feel like engineering, you're just creating the tools to solve problems, like whether that be a physical tool or like a software tool. So it's like you can be an engineer who just like makes something, but you don't care about the application of it. But I think we're all engineers who are like very like conscientious. That word.
The VMware example is kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. One of the co-founders, I think, of VMware spoke at the conference yesterday morning in like a talk about how AI is going to change the workforce. And then I went to go do a homework assignment like probably 2 hours later and used VMware to access like my school's virtual desktop to like do a problem. So it's kind of funny because we had just heard her speak, and then I was using what she had created to do something. I don't know, our school's a couple thousand miles away from here, and I could just be there through the internet instead of actually having to be physically there and get to access all those resources. And that's not just me who does that, that's people all around the world all the time.
And I think that's one of the really cool things about technology is, like you said, just that it makes the world so much smaller and it makes your opportunities so much greater. So like you said, even though we're like thousands of miles away from where we go to school, you were literally able to access your desktop back at school. That's that enabling ability of technology.
Or for the project that we did together, we interviewed people from around the world. Like we spoke to researchers like in Norway, and we were easily able to do that, make the connection on LinkedIn, and then video chat with them.
So you have these incredible like information sources that are scattered around the world, and suddenly like the world is so much smaller, they're so much more accessible.
But I guess going back to like how we all came together, so we went to that conference, and and they talked about this summit that would be 2 years later in London, the one we're at now, and we were like, we really want to be there somehow, and
not just for the conference, but
Yeah.
also to go to London.
Yeah, also to go to London.
Neither of us had ever been. We're like, we'd love to go.
And so we had a friend who competed in DC in the student competition that was a part of that conference. And we were like, oh, we could put a team together, come up with an idea within these next 2 years, and then somehow end up in London in 2019.
These ideas went from like a platform for women to meet mentors in STEM.
Yeah, that was like our first.
Like we were coming up with ideas for 2 years straight. Like, what could we do? Like, what do we like?
Like, wherever we were, like, we could be, like, at dinner, and then, like, one of us would, like, something would hit our brain, like, we text each other under the table, like, oh my gosh, this could be our London idea. And then, I guess, can we say where we've worked, or how does that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was at NASA Jet Propulsion Lab 2 summers ago.
Wow.
And are we saying names? Celeste was also working nearby at another engineering construction company, and so we would get lunch every week. And my project there was on drones, like on things that fly, and my team there is like a running joke was that like, what if we were working on submarines instead? Like, we're like, this would be easier if these were submarines. And then I was talking to Celeste, and I was like, what if we like did something related to submarines? Or like underwater robotics for our project. And then there was like a presentation that I saw that like mentioned Europa, which is one of Jupiter's icy moons. And I was thinking about how difficult it would be like if you had a lander that landed there to actually like go into the water that's on Europa and then somehow like communicate that information of what they saw back to Earth. And we were talking about that and brainstorming, and
then Marlink was born.
Marlink was born.
Sorry, that
But
was
then,
weird.
like, even from the idea, we were like, okay, well, who are we going to have join us, right?
Yeah.
And meanwhile, we're living in a house, the two of us, with 4 others, 2 other engineers. And we're like, this might be good just to bring them on the team. Like,
And we
why
actually
not?
had asked other people to join us, and they said no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who? The other 2 were
Boys.
boys. Yeah. So I'm glad they said no. And then we're like, wait, how? Like, what are the chances that like Sophia and Sienna would say yes?
Yeah.
And then we were like trying to think of the right way to ask them. And then I was having dinner with Maria, and I like told her about this idea, and she was like, wait, can I do it? And then somehow Maria came home with us that night, and then we saw you 2, and we were like, so project.
We just sat together in the living room of our tiny like
House.
shack.
We did live in a shack.
We literally lived in a shack.
yeah.
And we're all together in this tiny living room, like squeezed together on the couches, like, yeah, let's make this project. And then from there, it kind of just like tumbled, and we just kind of came up with something. We iterated. We were chosen as the team from our school to represent our school, and
I mean, that's a big deal.
went from there.
Yeah.
It was cool. A lot of us are pretty involved in the like greater engineering community at our school, which I think made a really big difference for us those first couple months, and we between like them creating the team and then us being chosen to come here, because we did a lot of like preliminary pitch competitions and had a lot of mentoring with our university that I think completely changed the project, how comfortable we were speaking, how we just like knowing about the entrepreneurship space kind of, and how we could get to where we wanted to go, which made I think a world of a difference now, because we have an idea that's pretty well thought out. And if we had the funding, we think that it could be a real thing. So I think that was honestly what the push that we needed, the fact that we had people who were willing to help us and teach us. Because at the beginning, I didn't know a lot about what entrepreneurship entailed and what innovation really meant. And our idea through doing like customer discovery, talking to these people that we're talking about in Norway and all around the world, was when we realized what the real problem was, which we had thought was, I think, slightly different in the beginning. And without customer discovery, without those people talking to those people, without us talking to those people, we would have never known anything.
Our product would have been entirely different.
Came
a
a
entirely
long way
different
different.
application at this point, which is fun.
So it's come a long way in 2 years.
Less than 2 years, about a year
The
now.
idea is like, it's so shifted. And
And
it's
is
crazy
it,
seeing
has it
that.
become more real?
Yes.
Definitely,
Yes,
it's become
yes.
more
It's become more real, and it's become more practical, there's
feasible,
more applications
definitely.
Yeah.
than what because I mean Roxy,
Yeah.
Roxy was talking about Europa at first, and we were like, oh, how are we going to communicate with Jupiter's moon? And now we don't even think about Europa as much with our product anymore. It's completely an Earth focused. All the applications are focused on Earth.
Yeah, I think like the thing was we were thinking about underwater communication in Europa, and then realized that aspect, underwater communication, is just as big of a problem on Earth as it is on Jupiter's moon. And so then, slowly kind of we were aware of this kind of abstract far away problem, and we started to get down to, but what is the real problem? And actually that's something that hasn't been solved here either. And so we were able to really pinpoint and bring down that problem.
I think also for me, like, it all seemed like not fun in games, but like, oh, we're just coming up with this idea, like we're making this pitch, like we're just trying to get to London, right? Like we're just trying to get to this competition, like we're just 5 gals like hanging out, like doing this thing, whatever. But then when we were at the pitch competition where we ended up getting second place, there was a VC, like an investor, Judge, who was a hardware investor, who came up to us at the end and was like, you need to patent this right now, like people will invest in you, like this is a big thing. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, like, we did something real. Like, this was a real thing that could possibly, go to market and, like, impact people. And that's when I found out that, like, the 5 of us, like, working together doing this thing, we actually did something. Like, it wasn't just, something silly. And I think sometimes, like, I don't know, like, as a good all-girl team, like, we get recognition for being an all-girl team, whatever. But, like, that's not it. Like, we made a real thing.
And I think each of us brings so many different facets to this project.
Yeah, I mean, I must say, like, listening to all of you, I can really hear the creative path that this project has taken. And you're striking such an amazing balance between it being very logical and rational, but also, like, imaginative.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
So, like, engineering is not kind of binary. It's not kind of...
I think a lot of our struggles with engineering have more to do with like the systems and institutions in which engineering currently lies, functions. Yeah. So for example, like universities, like straight up the educational system, like how engineering is taught, and then how engineering careers are labeled as engineering careers versus other pathways that you can take. So like stripped down at its core, engineering is really special to all of us, and all of us, I think, at this point can definitely consider ourselves engineers. But in society, I hate like talking about society. Society.
Why did you say that with a British accent?
So we don't mean to disrespect where we are.
No, but you know what? I think you really hit on something very profound, because as you know, I lived in your city for a number of years, and I loved the openness of LA. And like anything went. If you had an idea, if you had an engineering background but you wanted to be on television, that was cool. And not that I'm dissing my home country, but there is a lot more tradition going on. There's a lot more kind of protocol. And I think that can be very stifling to the creativity within engineering. So it's so refreshing to be amongst women who are like, we just came up with an idea that just became real. I don't know how that happened. We just wanted to come to London.
Yeah. So. And we weren't natural geniuses that knew how the technology would work. Like we weren't.
Yeah, we weren't experts on this technology at all. We learned so much through this process.
A lot of the success of our proof of concept or the technology behind it is the fact that we weren't afraid to ask questions and reach out to a variety of people at our university. We weren't afraid to be like, we don't know what we're doing, but we have this fledgling idea and we think it has hope. But yeah, it's a little unfortunate that the barrier of entry to engineering seems so high when I think we all know that it's like one of the most accessible and democratic fields you can enter. It's like just making things really.
Well, there was just the 13-year-old girl that spoke at this conference, and she was just like, I found a problem. Like Flint, Michigan in the US like doesn't have clean water, and there's lead in the water, literally poisoning people. And I decided that I would make this thing that can sense lead in the water. And she made it out of an Arduino, which is like $20, and some wires. And she built something that didn't exist before and was cheap and sustainable.
And worked.
And worked. And
it was literally a solution to a problem.
Yeah. And it's amazing, like, seeing at this conference as well, like, people that just identify a problem in their life and they just solve it. Like, someone else that, she needed to keep the chicks warm in her, like, poultry farm in Africa, and she was just like, I'm going to build something that does this. And that's
but we do that every day.
Yeah.
Everybody, people do that every day. You don't need to be in engineering school or be exposed to engineering at a young age to be doing what engineering is.
Right.
To solve
and I
the
think
problems.
people, think you need to be in a lab with a laser cutter and a 3D printer to be doing engineering, but
And
really
be
you
really
do
good
it
at math,
Yeah,
and
no.
physics.
Yeah.
It's like
No.
engineers are tinkerers. Like,
Yeah,
we
just
just
we have
experiment,
computers
we
to
screw
do all
up.
that now.
I think that's like the
Yeah.
thing, like it's about not being scared to take on the problem, and just like what I think Maria was talking about this before, of like now she's not scared to like fix her TV when it doesn't work, and
Yeah.
it's like
I think, I don't know if you guys I know you guys experience this.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you tell someone that's not in engineering that you're an engineering student, the first thing they say is always like, wow, you're so smart.
Yeah,
I
like,
could
isn't that
never do
hard?
that. I hate math. And that makes me so sad to my core because it's really so accessible. And like Roxy was mentioning, ultimately, like the biggest thing that strings us all together is not our physics skill, because I do not
definitely
share
not.
that with a lot of people. Not our math skill, not our enjoyment of being in dark corners, coding, like all the stereotypes. It's what we were talking about yesterday, where it's like we all, through the trials and tribulations of an engineering education, have gained this newfound courage to just take on these problems. I mean, I think that's where some people are more naturals. That 13-year-old girl, unlike me at least at that age, she wasn't scared to solve the problem immediately and approach it immediately. So it's almost this like self-belief that you are the person that can solve this problem, and it's not because of some inherent genius or idea from a power above. It's all within you. But
Oh, I love that.
yeah, it's a little sad that we feel like we need to gain so much credibility, and I think that is a girl thing too.
Yeah.
Like on top of that, we think as women we need to have all this extra credibility to solve problems, but really, like right now we could leave and do something on an Arduino Raspberry Pi and solve a small problem.
You don't need credibility, you just need confidence.
Yeah, really. And isn't that a theme with women in all fields at this point? It's just like, just believe in yourself.
Please. Yeah, it's such a problem for women. And I don't know where that comes from. Like, as engineers, have you experienced that kind of like boy-girl thing where you're like, I don't know if I can assert myself right now?
I think everybody does in
Yeah.
engineering,
That was-
a little bit at least.
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, I think. Especially like going into an engineering
Yeah.
school and like maybe coming from like a less technical background and feeling like everyone around you like knows what they're doing all the time.
Oh yeah, and I really think that is so part of why I was like, I'm not one of those boys. I'm not one of those boys who can be a mechanical engineer. I'm not one of those people that grew up doing all that. And I think it's because, and you mentioned something that I really resonated with me before. I was in an engineering program in high school, and I just remember all the time like the boys would always know how to use this machine, or like they would always know like, oh, you need like a center axis if you're gonna machine that big of a piece of like acrylic or something, and I always remember just thinking like they know so much more, like, oh, there's just so much more naturally talented at this than me, and that's not the case. Like we all came in at the exact same skill level, but they just happened to learn that a tiny bit before me, and that just always made it seem like, oh, the guys just have this innate knowledge for how to use all these
Or I guess
machines.
they have the confidence,
And it's
right?
exactly
That's the
that.
difference.
It's
They're
this
not
blind
scared,
confidence.
but we're scared of making mistakes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I
Also
think once
the
that clicked for me,
stereotypes.
I understood.
The stereotypes support that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, of course the boy would naturally think that. And it's like, no, hang on, we would have got there,
Yeah.
but just in our way.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily a worse way.
And I think it also starts at a young age where, like, you know, if you're like a 10-year-old boy, maybe your father or mother will like take you out and be like, oh, you're the person that's supposed to learn about how to fix the car. You're the person that's going to go do this tinkering. And like, I'm lucky because I have, we're a family of 3 girls, and my father is a tinkerer, and he always brought us into his tinkering and his shop and all that stuff. But I think like boys are just usually the ones that people grab and say, oh, learn how to do this, and girls maybe not. And it's hard because then it gives that innate advantage almost, or like confidence and like some ability going into school that creates this gap that you really need to close. And I think we need to change that and like have everyone should be a tinkerer. Like everyone should learn how to fix the car. Like that's a skill that you need in your life.
And
Like, why
everyone
not?
should be not afraid to fail.
Yeah,
You know?
that's a big.
There's not enough time spent on just allowing someone to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I think that really holds people back.
Yeah. Oh, and we were talking about this at the conference as well about like the increase in technology in our world. Like we all need to be able to adapt and shift to change, and like the world is unpredictable in so many ways now. And I think that having an engineering skill set is so important, and being able to tackle these these challenges that exist in our society, whether it's like technology or like politics and all these other things, like we need to be able to adapt and make mistakes and have confidence in our abilities, and like everyone has to be able to do that, no matter how old they are or what gender they are or anything, really.
It's really an identity thing in the end. In the past few years, people have more and more have started talking about this idea of the narrative that you string about yourself, and how what the story you tell about yourself is the one you start to believe. And so that's why it makes me sad when people say they're bad at math. Like they're not observing a reality, they're almost stating an identity. Like they're identifying with being bad at math. That's why I refuse to say I'm a bad dancer. Like I know I am. But I feel like if I just say I'm a bad dancer, I'm never gonna be a good dancer. And I wanna be a good dancer. And I don't know why we can't do the same thing with like harder disciplines.
But what does good dancing look like anyway?
It's like the opposite of what I'm.
I'm being honest, I think
Standard,
Ray's a good
right?
dancer.
I don't know. Yeah,
But also,
that's a
it's
good
like
question.
it's like the interest that you're pushed into young. Like engineering is kind of seen like cars and planes and all these things, and kind of what you're talking about before. Like boys are just given them; they're given toy cars, and we're given this, and it's like, well, if you don't think that you're, I think a lot of us kind of have struggled with this. Like I'm not interested in aerospace. I would never work I don't want to work in the aerospace industry, and I think that's scary because it's like, well, what else do engineers do? And they actually do a bazillion and one other things, but it's just not the stereotype. So you don't like cars, you're like, oh, but I don't like engineering then.
Yeah.
But really, engineering is in probably almost everything else, whether it's like fashion or, you know, everything.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say the point that I played with Barbies growing up, and I think the storytelling that like comes with like playing with dolls is like a big part of something that can go into like engineering as well, because I think you need to have a story around like what you're building and why you're building it to like motivate you. And I think even like playing with like toys that aren't like cars or airplanes and whatnot, it's like you kind of have to sometimes be even more creative and like build a house for your toys, for example. Like that's there's like building and engineering in that too. And I think we like marginalize that for girls a lot of the time.
Well, they're not told to think it's like engineering, right?
Yeah.
Even though it probably, my mom always says that she had a cardboard box when she was a kid that she turned into a Barbie, like a doll
I did that
house.
too,
Right? And that's what you said, it's building, but she would have never been like, yeah, that's engineering on a really tiny child scale, you know?
I think something you touched on, Sophia, is like really cool about like identifying what engineering is and like changing the conversation about not even just like who looks like an engineer, but also like the fields that engineering encompasses. And every single product that we have, like an engineer touched.
Everything we touch,
Literally everything that's physical. Pretty much everything's electrical these days. Everything's mechanical.
And like everything is more and more like online and programmed.
Even things that are very simple products, like all of that was manufactured somewhere.
Yeah, that paperclip was made somewhere.
Exactly. And
the pencil spring.
Yeah, exactly. And like it is sad that we have stereotypical engineers and stereotypical engineering interests, because we have all had the same conversations of like it's like coming out. It's like, I don't actually like cars. I don't care about space.
Or like I never played video games as a kid, you know? Like so many boys have this story of like, oh, I played video games and that's why I'm doing computer science. And it's like, I can't relate.
I played Cooking Mama.
Yeah.
Wait, I used to play
love
the
Cooking
zoo
Mama.
one.
Yeah,
Zoo Tycoon 2. Yeah, I used to play
Zoo
the zoo
Tycoon
one. But I would have never have said I play video games. I'm gonna be an engineer.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
But maybe I could have. Who knows?
No, exactly. But it's sad because like makeup is such a huge engineering field.
But chemical, that's all chemical engineering.
Yeah. It's actually. Oh, I love this fun fact because the co-founder of Cisco was a brilliant woman. Later would found Urban Decay.
Really?
Yes. It's crazy. But she's someone, you listen to her, I listened to a podcast where she was interviewed, and this was like in the 70s, and she actually, her and her husband who founded Cisco together got really, how do you say screwed over in a not?
I just said it.
Okay, they got really screwed over by the business people that they brought in. Like they basically got ejected from the company, which is unfortunate. But she's someone, when you hear her speaking from the perspective of a woman who was young in the 70s, she really doesn't seem to have those limitations, like those mental limitations that a lot of us, even in later years, would grow up with. So it was fascinating. I feel like that's where her secret genius comes from, is she just didn't have this limitation despite her circumstances. And so she got super screwed over, got ejected from the company, didn't make half as much money as she should have from founding freaking Cisco. But then she just was like, oh, I like these colors and I don't find makeup for me, so I'm just gonna do this. And I think that's proof that it's not networking, phone networks, whatever. Like, that's not what makes an engineer. It's, our networks aren't connected. I don't know how Cisco works.
But it's even like there are not products for me that I like on the market, so I'm going to make them myself. I'm going to do them myself.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most fascinating engineering stories I heard about makeup is, butterfly wings are really iridescent, and it's about the way light is reflected off the landscape of their wings, like on a microscopic scale. It's really complex. And so L'Oreal, I think, were coming in and trying to mimic that.
Wow.
Biomimicry is so cool. They could stop using toxic dyes in their makeup.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
That is an engineering solution.
Yeah.
And I love that kind of creativity. But actually, in terms of limitations that you mentioned, like, what limitations have you all experienced doing engineering?
Well, I wanted to say, I think we've been talking a lot about, we've been told this as a kid and this and this and this, and it's brought us here. But I think a lot of the limitations are also self-imposed. Like, I don't think all the times I've been scared to be in engineering or have felt like it wasn't right for me have been because I wasn't told that from the time I was 2 years old. A lot of it's just you yourself not knowing how to get there. And if you don't, like, we've been lucky, a lot of us, we have mentors, we have people around us who we can look up to, and each other. That was cute. Like, a lot of people don't have that. They're not as lucky. And, boys or girls, if you don't have somebody to guide you, you have 3 more barriers to figure out how to hurdle yourself, or there's not somebody to help you get over it. In a way.
Yeah, we definitely didn't grow up in that era where we were talking about we have this amazing professor of dynamic systems and controls, and I think she's Russian, and she's super cool, she's amazing. And she was telling someone that back in the day, when she was like the lead engineer on a project, people just kept thinking she was a secretary. Like, we didn't deal with that, right?
But I will say, like, we've all talked about how whenever we meet an older man, usually in the industry or even like at the gas station, and they're like, oh, what are you studying? Or an Uber driver. Like, what are you studying? And you say, oh, mechanical engineering. The shock. The true shock on their faces. Oh my God, I'm so surprised. How could you ever be studying that? That's so difficult. Like, that's so amazing for you. And it's like, thank you. Like, I'm glad that I'm getting some recognition because it is hard and like I'm like pushing through and it's tough. But also, like, why are you so shocked? And what did you expect from me, like, that I was studying?
Also, so I think there are a lot of women in mechanical engineering. Like, we're getting there. We're not that.
Are you the entire...
No. Our school, this is the incoming class of freshmen this year at our university is 50-50. Yeah. Not across every major. Like, biomedical is definitely a much more female field. And in fields like electrical and computer science, you really don't
computer science has a lot of women,
actually.
But electrical has very few. I think it's a hardware thing where, like, hardware is scarier. And going
but we are not the norm.
But
our university, we're really lucky. We're not the norm across the US, and especially not across the world.
I think it's the best in the US.
Yeah, I don't think it's something our university really, really is trying for. It's something that they, like, use as a marketing, like, it's something that they're really actively working towards. So in that sense, we are very, very lucky.
Yeah. But then it's funny that we still face some of this, even though our university is almost 50-50. Yeah. And then imagine at schools where it's 20-80 or 30-70, how much more magnified this becomes.
So there's some systemic barriers that we face, and so a lot of women in engineering face it where they are few and far between. So we don't have that, but there's some, like, weird just social things that we face in just interacting with some of our male peers or some of our older lab mates
or professors.
Like,
just
like what?
Sometimes it's condescension. Sometimes it's a weird sexual situation.
Yeah. We call it we have a term, mansplaining. You guys use that?
Yeah. I've never really understood what that is.
When someone explains something to you that you obviously already know.
Yeah.
Like when someone...
Which happens kind of often.
Did you know that the sky is blue because blah, blah, blah? It's like...
Wait, I have a story.
Like, I
remember you were just mansplaining.
I literally have a story, and it's kind of funny. So my the summer after my first year of university, I was doing research also for NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, but I was doing the research at my university's lab. It was like a weird contractual situation. Anyways, we go. It had to do with heating, and so I go and I what was it? Wait, something. Oh, I had to solder something. And so I plug in the soldering machine and I wait for it to heat up. And it's like clearly not heating up. I'm testing it on the metal and like testing it on a little sponge thing, and I'm like, okay, it's not heating up. So I go to, and I was a new member of the lab. I like was the first year, and I go to him and I was like, oh hey, do we have another soldering machine anywhere? This one's not working. And he's like, did you plug it in?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, I did plug it in. And he's like,
are you at that point thinking, how could you be asking me that question?
how could you be asking me that question? Because it was like as if my first instinct when I like acquired the thing and like put it in and like I guess tested it out was like to ask some dude in my thing. Like obviously I've gone through enough troubleshooting with this very simple heating device to it's freaking, you plug it in and the metal gets hot.
Yeah.
You know, you'd think that I have been through the troubleshooting process to go to him then, like it's more serious than just, oh, silly me, I forgot to plug it in. and then
Accent's coming out again.
no, sorry, I'm sick, so I think, okay, sorry, I do a lot of accents all the time.
We were talking about that.
No, I'm kidding.
But
you know what's amazing about that is that I think, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that men want us to ask them. They want to feel needed.
Yeah.
they want to solve the problem, and I think it's frustrating when, because we're good at troubleshooting, you know, surprise,
intimidating.
Yeah, now the problem is a little bit harder when we come to them. It's not as simple as, oh, idiot woman didn't plug in machine and now it's not working. And then the best part, then the master student I was working under, he comes in and I was like messing with the guy. I was like, can you believe he didn't think I plugged it in? Like, that's why he didn't think it worked. Like, the soldering machine clearly doesn't work. And he's like, oh, did you see if it got hot? And I was like, what? Yes, it didn't. It didn't melt the solder. And he was like, oh, did you touch it? And I was like, no, I don't need to touch it with my hands to see if it gets hot. And then in our apparatus, it also was a heating device. And he would tell me before he left, he said it will get up to like 400 degrees Celsius, something crazy. It's like super high temperatures. He's like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. To test if it's hot, just put your hand kind of over it. And I was like, I know. I'm not going to touch it. What is up with boys and touching things? To test if they're hot.
No, but I've struggled with that so much because as a woman that's very capable and educated and all that, you want to show that you're not stupid.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so when guys are mansplaining, I love that word, I'm using it so much now in my relationship. It's like he's gonna go through hell. But like when you're being mansplained to, like you want to stand up for yourself and just go, I've already thought of that. But then you come across as defensive.
Yeah.
And then they feel like they're not useful or wanted. And so you run into this like weird tension that doesn't need to be there. And it's all based on insecurity.
Yeah.
They feel insecure because they feel intimidated by our intelligence. And I feel insecure because I'm being treated like I'm dumb. And it's like a mess. And I honestly don't know how to handle it. Even today, after years and years of trying, I'm like, I don't know how to handle this situation of like being treated like I'm stupid when I absolutely have done so much in my life to prove otherwise.
Yeah.
What if
You have a doctorate, and you're still.
Does anyone have any kind of tips?
I was gonna say it makes it worse too when you actually do something silly. It's like if you did like every once in a while like I can't find the on or off like something silly that like doesn't matter if you're a girl or a boy, a woman or a man, you do it. Like you make mistakes and then you get asked that question and like that. Like really, you didn't think to do this, and you're like, oh, actually, I didn't. I didn't think to do that, and then all of a sudden, you just like it's like you just feel horrible.
Yeah.
And it makes it even worse because then a lot of times you're like, yeah, duh, I know how to do that, and you can know how to do it when you mess them too. But people make mistakes, and boys will just be like, don't worry, like I'll show you how. Like a professor or anybody, this is not a problem, and then you always kind of get like a look, like I should have known that you wouldn't be able to. I should have known that I had to show you first, and it makes it 100 times worse.
Yeah. I
People
know
mess
exactly
up.
what you're talking about because I actually now describe myself as, doing really, really dumb things, because I think it's because there's such an expectation, because, you know, of my title or whatever, everyone's like, oh, she must be really smart. And so if you do forget to just flip the switch on, it's like, oh my gosh, there's a part of my brain that is just so like stupid, even though I've got these qualifications. And that like divide, because I do really dumb things all the time.
Everybody does.
So
I'm the biggest
everyone.
klutz in the world.
And
Half
we-
of us are.
Yeah, and we see those things and we're like, we're dumb. We see the things that we mess up. And I think a lot of other personality types that tend to be male would see all the positive things they're doing and be like, I'm so smart. Like, I'm so smart. That was one tiny thing that I did wrong. Where we're like, I'm like,
Well, it goes back to our
fixate on it
identity.
more.
We can't, like, every time we like almost like collect this like huge amount of evidence to why we should identify as like incapable or stupid.
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
I don't know. And the mental chess that goes on when like anything happens, like sometimes people will correct me and I'll have to be like, I know it starts at 7. Like, does it really mean that much? Yeah, and then it affects all of your other relationships. You're just like this angry defensive person.
I think it's important to give feedback though. I think that's something that we're scared to do a lot of time as women, because we're scared of being seen as like complainers. And so it's
emotional,
being emotional,
right? Not being able to take criticism,
right.
And I think there's almost this like binary where a lot of the time I feel like women are either put in two baskets of one, they're either a bossy bitch or they're too mild and meek and staying up for themselves, which I think is really frustrating, because there's so much that exists in between. And I think I often feel like, oh gosh, like I just asserted myself too much. I'm being too bossy. But if I don't say anything, I'm being too mild. And it shouldn't be like that. You don't need to be one or the other. You can just be expressing yourself in the way that you want to.
That's why I think we need to just like, if a guy says something that bothers us, we need to let them know that does, because oftentimes they don't know, or they don't realize like the magnitude of what they're saying. Like I've definitely like had situations where I've had to like tell a male like lab partner or colleague like, hey, that is not okay.
But you kind of have to deliver it with kindness, and that can be really hard if your intelligence is being
if you feel attacked,
diminished.
Right.
I will say humor is a great way to mitigate that, where the whole soldering situation, it was really funny. And I just clowned them forever. Like I always, and I made it seem like, you're so dumb that you thought I didn't plug it in, but I made it a joke. And I don't know, I felt like I came out on top of that.
I think that's a really good way to go, but there are just some days when you're not feeling funny, you know.
Or when someone, it's worse than they call you a fool. I'm not even joking. My lab, my principal investigator in my lab, we didn't know what a lug nut was, like some little thing, and then he was like, fools. He said fools. I don't know why he said it like that, and I was like I was like put to silence. I was like,
it's really disarming, where you're like, and then you're like, what's going through your mind is just like this whole questioning, like finding evidence from the past few months of like how you might be a fool or whatever. But I think what we're talking about is kind of imposter syndrome.
Oh, definitely,
You know, where you're in this situation. I think you mentioned it at some point where you were saying that the whole I don't like cars, I don't like aerospace, and it's kind of that feeds into the imposter syndrome. And it's such a shame, because engineering breaks new ground. It's like new territory. I mean, all of you are doing a project that has never been done before. That's the magic of it. And from this conversation, I'm realizing that it's all about confidence.
Like even with the terminology, like I feel like if you grow up liking cars, you know what an axle is, and you know how tires work. I don't know. If you showed it to me, I would know. I've been through more than 3 years of an engineering education. All of us will be able to figure it out within a couple minutes. It's not impossible.
Right.
But because I don't know the word, it's like, oh, you don't even know it all. But if you just took a second to show me a photo or show me what that does, like I can figure it out. But because I don't know the word, it's like then I don't know anything at all.
Our CAD class.
Oh my god, so much.
Like, no one ever told me what a bearing was. Like, I
or
didn't know.
Or
a hex nut. And like, there's all these things like, you download the file from McMasterCar and it has all these fasteners. I was never taught this in any class. And I was expected to know it. And all of the guys in the class knew, because they had like been taught about cars and stuff. A lot of them, they knew.
But that's something I think is so important, is you think all of these other people know, but it's those four voices that
it's
are
a lot
like
of male
obvious.
posturing.
It's not.
But
that's
our
something
professor,
so important to understand.
But our professor
They
was
don't know.
honestly condescending about it.
super
When you asked
condescending.
questions about it, and it was like, I'm sorry, like, it's your responsibility to teach me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry that you didn't teach me.
But even
what
like
this
if you give me a
was.
minute to Google it, like I will get
Yeah.
to where your
Right.
understanding is. I just
Yeah.
need to actually learn it. I don't know it.
Yeah, and you're not beyond
Yeah.
capable of just
No.
quickly learning something.
A bearing is like a tiny little piece. We can figure it out. It's not.
It's not.
I hate it when
rocket
people
science.
use that as evidence. Go,
Yeah.
see, you didn't know, and it's
Yeah.
like all I have to do is just Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
not a problem. I have
Yeah.
So
research
much of
skills,
engineering.
Yeah.
You know.
Right.
Also, there's a issue where there's some universities, including ours, that are trying to change the face of engineering, but some of the culture still hasn't changed, where like male interests are still valued over female interests and expected over female interests. To make it into a binary, obviously we know it's not so black and white, but like I don't think I should be burdened in class by the fact that outside of class I read a lot more politics and philosophy and art articles and videos than some of maybe the more tech news articles that I
Yeah.
guess I should be consuming.
But also, I totally understand what you mean, and I find I'm massively generalizing here, but women tend to be interested in things that are nurturing and, you know, do good and are humane, and men tend to go for projects that are money making and big structures and, you know, and that doesn't necessarily excite me. Like, I want to know about technology that's helping the world.
Right.
You know, and it's not even an art versus
Yeah.
or politics versus engineering thing. It's actually just, you know, I am so deeply fascinated by technology that improves people's lives, and because when I see suffering in the world, I'm like, can't engineering just solve that? And I find that all of our media is dominated by, I don't know, just very toxic ambitions.
Right.
But I think we've learned, Sienna and I have learned a lot, that a lot of solving those problems in places where there is real suffering every single day, it's like the engineering it doesn't work without the politics also following.
Exactly.
And if you
Yeah.
don't read those articles,
Yeah.
you don't know, you're never going to be able to get the traction or you need governments to buy your product and endorse your product, and if they're not approving it, you're not going to be able to use it. So if you're not reading that, you're going to have to learn it if you
You're missing
want to
the
solve
picture.
it.
How do you solve world problems without engaging with the world around you?
You don't.
Yeah, you don't. That's why I have a bit of a problem with just like super intense curriculums where we don't leave the house or we don't leave our study groups, and we're always either all day in class or all day studying, drilling these problems. And like we all agreed, is like, sure, the fundamentals are important, but then it's about that hands-on. It's about identifying problems and then solving them. If we're in such a silo, like how are we supposed to solve such wide-reaching problems?
Yeah.
And they can't all be these like big, oh, we need to make this faster, better, stronger, make more money. Like there's so many important world problems that are solved with different types of engineering.
Yeah, which kind of is a nice circle back to what brings us all together here at this event, because it's about solving or even just identifying global challenges. One of the things that I have been picking up on in our conversation is the importance of mentorship, and you seem to have received a lot. How has it affected you?
And for me, it was huge. I keep circling back to this kind of like, you know, I didn't believe in myself as an engineer for a lot of my life. But having mentors, and like we said, it for me, I think really was almost entirely internal. I don't feel like I had people going up to me and being like, you should be in marketing because you're a woman. I had myself saying, I can't picture myself doing this thing that I would like so much more. So I think mentorship and just having people, even just like a strong female role model to point to and be like, oh, like I could do that, I could be that, that's a path I could follow. But also I think something really important for women to understand is that your mentors don't always have to be women. Because I think that can also kind of close you off from what opportunities you can have. You can also find very strong advocates and like inspiration in a path taken by a man. So I think that's like something I think about mentorship.
Yeah.
And like I said, my male engineering director who was like, what are you talking about? Like, you are an engineer. Why are you so dismissive of your skills and your interest? And that was a male figure in my life that absolutely impacted the trajectory of my life.
Cool. So, last words of advice for any young girls that are thinking of following in your footsteps?
I actually was just talking to someone at one of the mentoring sessions here at the conference, and she was giving me the advice of just like keeping your goal so clear to you. And I was talking about, you know, balancing like working for a corporation and like also trying to solve these big grand challenges that we're speaking of. And she was like, if you just have a goal in mind, engineering and technology is the tool to get you there. Just like keep your morals and your goal like clear to you and what you want, and then like all these other things will follow, I feel like. And just like sticking to your gut and like being confident about the strength that you know you have and like the goal that you know you seek. And a lot of the times those goals are like societal problems that we want to tackle, and just keeping that like so clear to yourself and keeping motivation even if people are astounded by the fact that you're tackling these problems or whatever, and just like knowing your value.
But I think it's also important to know that you don't need to have a singular goal. Like, it's really amazing when people know and they have this whole, not that you know by all, but they have this whole beautiful trajectory that gets them there, and they're, you know, it's kind of clean, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I think something that I think a lot of us have really had to learn, because it was really scary for me my first two, even now honestly, but especially in my first 2 to 3 years of school, when I went through probably like 5 different ideas of what I wanted to do. And I had no idea, and I still don't know, but it's okay not to know, and engineering can get you there, even if it's not what you're going to be doing in 30 years maybe. That's like you're, you know, interact with the field every single day, and you had the background to get you where you are now in the first place. And I think an engineering education is not just for people who want to be in a lab or people who want to be in big industries. And it can, not knowing what you want to do just lets you accept more opportunities and lets you be more open to doing that. And I think that's something that can scare a lot of engineers, because we like answers and we like, you know, solutions, but not having that can lead to a lot of other really great things inside and outside of engineering, especially because engineering is not just a bubble anyway.
I would say not being scared of putting yourself in many different categories. Like, don't put yourself into a box of like, this is what I am, like I'm an engineer, I have to do these things. Like, I think at least through our college experience thus far, there's been so many opportunities that have like come our way, such as like going to that conference our like freshman year that like led us eventually here, you know. It's just like, it's a matter of like, even if you're scared of trying something, just putting yourself out there and being like, oh, I'm like a little bit interested in this, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Say yes.
Say yes
to
say
things.
yes.
Yeah.
I think, kind of a little bit to echo that. I like the idea of just, because I think we've all like had a little bit of just being unsure of what we inevitably want to do, and that can almost be paralyzing. Like, why does everyone else know what they want to do and I don't know? I think one also side note, very important thing to recognize is no one knows what they want to do, and if they do, they're lying to themselves. Because if you're 20 years old and you know what you want to do until you're 80, that's closed-minded. That's wrong. And if you talk to role models and peers and older people, even you've done so many cool different things, and there's absolutely no way, I'm sure, that when you were 20 you were like, this is what I want to do when I grow up. No way. That's really reassuring to see that there's all these different nodes, and they'll connect themselves. You'll be able to look retrospectively and see how all of that connects. And I think something that's important to repeat to myself is, even though I'm not positive what I want to do long term until I'm old and dying, is that just like chase the shiny object. Like don't think like, oh, what is it that I want to do? Just chase whatever at the time is the coolest thing for you to do, the coolest, shiniest, most exciting thing. And that will eventually, if you keep doing what's coolest to you, that's how you're gonna get. That's how I hope that I will get to where I want to go.
Yeah. Hi, young girls interested in engineering. I guess my advice goes a little bit back to that conversation about mansplaining and constantly thinking you need to like assert your credibility. Is part of it is you have to accept that you really can't control what everyone thinks about you. And I struggle with this in many realms. And so sometimes some people, no matter how hard you try, are just gonna think you're stupid. And that's actually believe it or not, okay. We can navigate in a world where people don't like us, think we're dumb, think we're mean, think we're incapable, whatever. Like, heck, we know we feel that way about some people and they're doing fine. And that annoys us a little bit. So it's good almost to think, okay, some people I care about what they think about me. I'm going to work on those. But for a lot of people, just letting go about how they feel about us and just recognizing that luckily the beauty of engineering is that your credibility comes from just your actions. Like, do you know what you're talking about? And it's okay to not know. Just learn. And do you know what you're doing with it? And have you done something with it? That's so much more important than your grade that you got on your physics exam 2 years ago, your degree. So viewers or listeners, I am going to leave university without an engineering degree. I'm going to leave it with a writing and storytelling degree because I switched after 3 years of studying engineering. But for some reason, every time I go to one of these conferences, especially this one and being with all my girlfriends here, I leave more and more empowered about my career as an engineer because ultimately I'm realizing more and more like, wow, we are so capable of everything we set our minds to, and I don't need that degree. I know what knowledge gaps I need to fill, but ultimately, like, it is about believing in yourself, and I know that this new degree is going to help me engage with the world in a way that will help me identify the problems that I've always cared about solving. So yeah, just, you shouldn't care too much about what that one kid in your lab thinks of you. Let him think that you forgot to plug in the solder. It's okay. That's
wow.
my advice.
And on that note, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been
Thanks
an
for
amazing
having
conversation.
us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
That's it from my STEM guests this week. What an amazing conversation. I literally have goosebumps at what was said. And you know, the biggest thing that comes out of this conversation is the fact that engineers are true problem solvers, and the most important thing to getting to that solution is confidence and self-belief. Thank you so much for listening this week. Don't forget to rate and review the show, and catch you next week on Scilence.